Perfect, the mic is on. Well, thanks a lot for the intro, and thanks all for joining today. And the topic today will be career growth. And how many of you here are PMs? Again, the majority, so that's good. You came to the right talk, because otherwise it would be a bit less applicable. So that's perfect. So what I'm going to share with you today in this talk is a framework that I've used since 5 years now, and it's been the most helpful framework I ever came across in terms of improving and better managing my own career. It's also one of the first and most important frameworks that I share with all of my coachees and people I manage and coach. And it's also the framework that I share with all my good friends whenever they ask me for career advice. And so what I'm going to do today is share that with you, and I hope it can help you in your day-to-day as well. Now, I was going to share a few words about myself. Maybe I can explain a tiny bit more what Alan is, just so you know what type of company I work at. So we were founded a bit more than 6 years ago in Paris. Now we work in Spain and Belgium. We launched Spain a year and a half ago. That's why you maybe haven't heard of us yet. And we're 500 people, so pretty big, one of these scale-up companies, and worth 2.7 billion. So it's not an early-stage company. It's not big tech either. So now you know kind of what my biases are when I talk to you about career growth. That's the kind of company that I'm used to, and before N26 and Typeform were very similar. So like scale-ups, that's the reality that I know best, and that's what I'm going to be sharing in this talk today. So let's talk about career growth, which is today's topic, and here the theory I think we all know, which is we're in a certain point today in our careers, and then we have a vision of where we want to be in the future. So 5 years from now, you might have the dream to start your own thing and become an entrepreneur, and you already have that in the back of your head. You might want to be, or you might be an individual contributor PM, and you want to be a manager of PMs, like in Jeremy's talk earlier, or you could be a head of product and you want to become a CPO at a bigger, more important company, whatever it might be. In theory, you have this very clear in your head, and then you have a personal development plan that neatly brings you there in small iterations, and so strategically you grow your career. Now that's the theory, and the practice, from what I found, looks very different. And that's because PMs are busy. The day-to-day can be brutal almost, because you get pulled in so many different directions. You need to finish Q2, you need to start Q3 and plan, you have the product strategy, there's a team without PM support, so you need to help them out. There's a recruiter on LinkedIn that's spamming you, so it's just like going in all different directions. And so that fancy vision of ourselves 5 years from now usually tends to be forgotten. And instead it becomes this promotion that I want next year, because that's going to give me a bit more money and it's going to be great. But it's a bit of a shame, because there's so much more than that. And the symptoms of this being dragged around in our day-to-day are first that career growth can be equated with getting promoted. And that's really a shame, because it's so much more than that. It's actually about growing as a professional, which usually implies growing as a personal human being. And these are really important things that make us grow, and it's not just climbing that next rung on the ladder. The second symptom is that personal development plans, in theory, are documents that invite introspection, that really help you to find the truth of who you are and where you want to be and all these things. But instead, what I've seen at most companies, they're a PowerPoint document with a template that you need to fill, and these become your pitch decks for the next promotion committee. And since it's public first, like everyone's going to read it, you're not going to put the truth in there, you're just going to try to make yourself look good, and so they lose the purpose of helping you grow in your career, which is why they exist in the first place. And finally, a lot of PMs, and this is surprising, but a lot of PMs take a reactive approach to new opportunities. So when a stakeholder comes to you with a feature request, you're going to be like, oh, but why do you want to do this? And have you thought it through and all of that? But when the recruiter comes and says, hey, you can have this fancy title and 10K more per year, why not? I'll take it, and then I'll see where it goes. And you immediately forget about this plan of yours 5 years from now. And so we get dragged around and kind of hop from one thing to the next. And all of this is a shame, because career growth is so much more than that. And that's what the framework that I'm going to be sharing today is all about, and it's called Career Fuel. And it's a very simple premise, which is that basically a career is long, and so what you're going to do is you're going to need fuel to sustain that. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and you should view everything you do and how you spend your time in a very strategic way, and really think about what are the opportunities for you to gather this fuel. Now, this framework comes from a book called The Long View by Brian Featherston from Ogilvy, which is an advertising company. So it's with a broad audience in mind, but it's very applicable to PMs. And the premise of this book is a very surprising one as well, in the sense that most of us, we started our careers in our 20s, and most of us will retire in our 60s. And if you make the math, that's 40 years. And so if you think about, oh, 2 years from now I want this promotion, and a year from now I want this promotion, but it's like you're losing sight of the bigger whole. And so the whole point of this framework of Career Fuel is to think about what do I need to be sustainable and happy and fulfilled for the next 20, 30 years of our careers. And there are 3 types of fuel: transferable skills, enduring relationships, and meaningful experiences. And what I'll do in this talk today is I'll explain each one of these types of fuels to you, and then I'm going to give you actionable pointers of how you can include those in your day-to-day so that you can kind of make it work for yourself. So, the first type of fuel is transferable skills. And in order to talk about transferable skills, I need to answer the question, what the hell are transferable skills? And they're the opposite of domain skills. Now, domain skills, it's pretty straightforward. They're skills that are depending on your current role, your current company, or your current industry. And once you change that, so if you go to another company or industry or whatever, then you need to relearn different domain skills, which means the previous ones you've learned become kind of obsolete, and you need to relearn a new set of those. For example, specific industry knowledge. I was working at N26. I needed to learn at least the basics of how payments work. Then I went to Alan, which is healthcare, and this knowledge doesn't serve me. And probably by the time it will serve me again, it will have moved on, and so I'll have to relearn a whole new set of domain skills. It's the same for tools. PMs love to be in tools and really immerse in those and learn a lot about those. Like, ooh, the Jira implementation in my company, then you move to the next one, they use linear. And again, all your knowledge kind of, it doesn't go to waste, but it's not as relevant. And it's the same for understanding your company's code base or the data warehouse or all of these things. The main point is when you move on, they don't transfer. Which brings me to transferable skills, and they're the opposite, because no matter where you end up working, no matter which role you do or which industry, these skills come with you and they grow with you. And the big 4 that I have for myself, and you don't need to take notes, I can send you those after the talk. I have a little email submission form where you can sign up for that. And so the first one is communication. Very simple things: speaking, listening, writing, feedback, giving and receiving it, and all these very simple things. Then leadership and collaboration, hiring people, what Jeremy was talking about, coaching and mentoring people, helping them grow, managing teams, setting up teams properly, all these things. The third bucket is emotional intelligence. This applies to yourself, understanding yourself and managing yourself. That's hugely important when you're a PM because it's so draining and so intense. But then it also applies to others. So having empathy and understanding people, like your users, your stakeholders, everyone around you, and also being able to persuade and influence people. That's hugely important. And finally, productivity, and these are things like decision-making, understanding cognitive biases, being good at strategy, being efficient at managing your time, very basic things, and basically being productive on the what and the how, okay? So the main message here is domain skills, once you switch and you move on in your career, they become less relevant and almost obsolete, while transferable skills grow and compound with you. What's the consequence? Well, you should do just enough on domain skills, and you should invest as much time and effort as possible on growing your transferable skills. And now I realize that it's a big list of skills that I just shared, and we all have a lot of skills to grow on. And so how do you prioritize that? Well, you think about where you want to be 5 years from now. And this doesn't have to be a perfect picture of I want to be exactly here or exactly there, but some kind of goal post that you can have 5 years from now, and it allows you to work backwards from there, and then you can prioritize your growth accordingly. So for example, if you want to be a manager of PMs, then probably you should become really good at hiring, which probably means you should prioritize that ASAP so that you can become effective at that, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really the way, and to make it even more actionable, the way that I do it personally is you start with feedback from others, which means if you don't have enough available, you ask them for feedback. That's really important. In a second step, you look at what came out of that feedback. So like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are the gaps that you want to fill? And then you compare that with your long-term goals, and obviously also with the reality at your current company, because that allows you to spend time on that. And then you create a 3-month action plan and you execute. And the final piece here is to be patient. So for example, I've been focusing on becoming a better writer for at least 5 years, and I know I'm going to spend at least another 5 or probably 10 or 15 years to continue to become a better writer. And so don't expect that in 3 months you can learn how to be empathetic or something like this. These things take really long. The main point is that you should know in which area you're going. and then prioritize based on that, and then be patient and really invest into those transferable skills. And that's the first type of fuel, and that's something that's going to power your career if you do it well, which is transferable skills. Now, we're going to go to the second type of fuel, which is enduring relationships. And this shouldn't be a surprise. As PMs, we work with people all the time. Business is all about relationships. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you kind of a map of the relationships in your life. And I'm mainly encouraging you to think about, oh, these things exist. I'm kind of doing it in my day-to-day, but I could be more mindful and proactive. So that's the kind of reflection that I want to trigger. And if you put yourself in the center, the first type of relationship that you have, and the most important one almost, is the one with your boss. And that's someone you don't spend that much time with, but you have these regular interactions. And here it's all about seeing them as someone who's basically walking the trail ahead of you. So there's someone who's in the same field as you are, but with a few years ahead of you. And so it's this amazing opportunity to learn from each other, to connect as human beings, and then you'll see that over time your paths will cross over and over and over again over your career. So it's really important to be mindful of that. The second types of relationships that you're exposed to every single day are the people in your development team, your stakeholders, and here it's so easy to be dragged into like, oh, we need to deliver this, or like, oh, the salesperson is complaining about that feature request again, and we're just in execution mode. But that's not the point. The point is that these are all people that you can learn a tremendous amount from, and these are the people, if you think about, for example, you want to be an entrepreneur 5 years from now, who's going to be your co-founder? It's probably going to be someone you work with. Who's going to be your angel investor? Probably an executive at a company, the one with the annoying feature request. And so it just keeps going like this. So I invite you to think about that and be strategic about it. And the last piece in your current company is the PM team at your company. Might be a big one, might be a small one, but again, many PMs get kind of sidetracked in the day-to-day. And so we focus on doing our stuff, and then we forget that there are all these smart PMs around us, and so we don't make enough time. So be proactive, make time, spend time with them, and learn from them. And then you can also look outside of your current company, so customers, partners, investors, whatever it might be. Here, a small anecdote from my own professional life. When I was at Typeform in Barcelona, one of the investors, it was Point 9 Capital, they opened a Slack group for employees at the portfolio companies, and it was purely optional, but I decided to join. And then one day, there was a CEO of a scale-up, I think it was Factorial at the time, who was like, hey, we're scaling our product teams, like, does anyone have any insights on that? And we're like, yeah, actually we do, because we just did that at Typeform. And so we just went for lunch, 3 PMs of our side, and the 3 founders, I think, of Factorial, and it was awesome. And that's the kind of relationships that you can only build if you go out there and seek them and are proactive. And then finally, there's the product community as a whole, and here I couldn't resist. It's the age-old conference advice, like you're sitting in a room full of smart PMs, so instead of hanging out with the people that you came with, just shake some hands, get to know someone new, and that's the kind of relationships that you want to build. So be curious, be proactive, that's what relationships are about. And again, there's like hundreds of people in your life, how do you prioritize? It's the same exercise. You think about 5 years from now, you bring that picture of your future self into your head, and then you think about, okay, which types of relationships do I need the most? And then once you kind of have that rough idea of where you want to be, then you think about, okay, who do you want to spend more time with? Who do you want to spend less time with? Because sometimes, you can't do more if you don't do less somewhere else. And finally, who are the people that you want to reach out to for the first time? And this is really important. Finding new people, new experiences, that's hugely important. That's the second type of skill, enduring relationships. So we covered skills, we covered relationships, but of course, as PMs, we know that you can have the best skills and relationships in the world, but if you don't do stuff, if you don't gain meaningful experiences, it's worth nothing. And what I mean by meaningful experiences is, for example, if 10 years from now I want to be a head of product at scale-ups and say, hey, I've done it before successfully, well then I should have done it before successfully, and so I should look out for these types of opportunities. If you want to be an entrepreneur, well then you should think about what have you launched before, what have you done 0 to 1, right? And so that's what meaningful experiences are about. And here, most PMs do it surprisingly well, which is awesome, so keep doing the 2 things that are on the slide, and I don't need to tell you much about it. It's being ambitious in asking for bigger, larger, more scary product scopes. So put yourself out there, grow out of your comfort zones. For some reason, PMs seem to be really good at that, so keep doing that and just push yourself. The second thing is always be shipping, measuring, and learning, which basically means doing our jobs. And that's hugely important as well, because we mainly learn by doing, and that's how you become a better PM. Not going to spend much more time, because I guess most of you do that really well already. But what most PMs tend to forget is that there's a whole world of opportunity outside of your day-to-day in your current company. And that's really easy to forget because we're so busy, right? And here I have two pieces of advice on this part of everything else. The first one is to put yourself out there, because how do you expect opportunities to come to you if people don't know that you exist? And that's literally the case for most of us. Like, we're a profile on LinkedIn, but if we don't put ourselves out there, don't like do anything, then people won't know we exist. And so that's not how you build a strong career. And you can do whatever fits you best. You can tweet, teach at a local business school. That's what I do. You can speak at a meetup, at a conference. You can start a podcast, a blog. You can mentor people. For example, if you want to be a manager of PMs, then tomorrow, even if you're an individual contributor today, you can go out, look for someone junior, and start mentoring them and learn basically all the skills you'll need. That's what I did back then. And you can start a YouTube channel. Like, whatever it is, the main point is stand for something, make yourself visible, put yourself out there. And there's a lot of imposter syndrome, like, oh, I don't have anything to say, or I don't know if it's going to work out. Like, just do it. Like, you know, this is about being courageous and putting yourself out there. The second tip is to be curious and seek new experiences. And the most basic way of accomplishing that is geographically, by moving somewhere new. And most people I know, like when they lived in a different continent or in a different country, it was this life-changing event and they came back transformed. So you can do that, but you don't have to change your life tomorrow, obviously. So think about this summer. What's your vacation? What did you plan? Like, is it the same island as last year and the same plan as last year and the same people? Well, maybe you want to try something new. Like, why not go to a new continent, a new culture, experience something completely new? And that's going to have the same effect. It's going to change who you are, change your outlook on things, and ultimately make you grow as a person, which then makes you grow as a professional. And here, one of my favorite stories is the origin story of Notion, which, I don't know, you all know Notion, right? Okay, cool. So Notion was started in San Francisco, a bunch of guys from there. And so they had a first version of their product. They were receiving some feedback, and it was okay, but people were telling them we need more features in order for it to be actually useful. And then there were two problems. The first one was they had taken a lot of shortcuts, which means you can't, like, they couldn't add features without rewriting the whole thing. But then in parallel of that, they were running out of cash. And so what do? Well, they made a rather unconventional choice, and they just sub-rented their apartment on Airbnb to make a bit of money. Then they took a flight, and they flew to Kyoto in Japan. Don't ask me why, I think it was pretty random, but they just went there. And it wasn't about the fact that they spoke Japanese or had some connection there, or that people there speak a lot of English, because it's not the case. And they ended up spending their days kind of similarly to before, which was coding in their underwear all day. And what it changed, though, was that they were in a new environment. They were exposed to new people, new food, new traditions, a new aesthetic, the design. And all of that was then reflected in Notion in the short term, but also in them as people. They grew, and then when they went back to San Francisco and ultimately Notion became the success story, it stayed with them and it made things better. Another famous example of Japan is Steve Jobs, right, who spent a lot of time in Kyoto absorbing the aesthetics, learning about the culture, and you can immediately see that in the whole philosophy of simplicity in the Apple products. So that's the second thing. Put yourself out there and be curious. And again, you can go to any country in the world, you can do any type of thing. So how do you prioritize? Well, you think about 5 years from now. What is it that you want to be, even if it's not a perfect picture? And then you think about what are the meaningful experiences that you will want to have lived. And to make that even more actionable, I really encourage you to try something new, whatever it might be, however small it might be, but try something new. The second thing is we usually underestimate our day-to-day. So there's actually a lot of learning opportunities in our day-to-day if we just make it meaningful and are a bit more mindful in how we approach it. And finally, don't overthink it. This is one of the core values at Alan. It's called bias to action, and it's really easy to fall into analysis paralysis, like this country, this type of thing, this type of thing. It's like, it doesn't matter. Just do it, and then you'll see, and afterwards you'll learn, and then you'll do another round. So basically, don't overthink it and bias to action. And to wrap up, if you think about the three types of fuel, transferable skills, enduring relationships, and meaningful experiences, the whole point of this framework is that you put a goalpost in front of you, even if that might change and even if you might change your plans, and then you work backwards from there and you think about skills, relationships, and experiences you want to acquire, and that's how you make a long-term, sustainable, and fulfilling career. And really, these are two examples of how you can apply it, and these are real screenshots from my own life. This is my current personal growth plan, and it's maybe a bit small to read, but basically you'll find that these are all transferable skills. Like, I don't prioritize any domain skills in my personal growth plan, where I'm right now. And then in terms of what I'm doing, it's all about finding meaningful experiences that I can do, new things that I can try, and connecting with people that can help me along the way. So it's really embedded in how I manage my own personal career growth. And also, it applies to when you change jobs. This is the moment when I usually share this framework with people that ask me for advice, which usually comes like, oh, I'm changing jobs, I don't know what to do. And so what I share with them is this is another real screenshot. Obviously, I left the information out to not be incriminating, but this was the last time I switched jobs a year and a half ago when I transitioned from N26 to Alan. And what I did is I looked at, okay, what's my current company, and then what are the 3 options that I had, and then I looked at what are the meaningful experiences I can expect. So what's going to be the short-term task at hand that I'm going to be working on for the first few months? How much of an opportunity will I have to lead teams of PMs, because that's something that matters to me? And how far is it from my comfort zone? And then I looked at the relationships I would be able to build. So how reputable is this company? And who's going to be my first boss, and how much can I learn from them? How great is the quality of the PM team? And for example, at Alan, I saw that people were coming from Square, from Stripe, from Facebook, from Google. They were all settling back from Silicon Valley in Europe, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. I can learn from all these people and work with them, and if they accept me, that is. And then that's how I prioritized. And so relationships, and then finally it's called transportable skills, but transferable skills, it's the same. And here, it was another thing where you usually don't think about it too much. But I knew I love writing, I love asynchronous working, I love transparency and feedback cultures. And that's basically what Alan is all about. And so I decided to join this company over maybe another one, because I knew that I would pick up all these transferable skills that in every single company I'm going to start or join in the future, I'm going to be bringing all of those skills there. And that's why I chose these companies. And you can do basically exactly the same. And yeah, that's basically it in terms of how you can apply that. Like, I know it was a lot of questions and skills and long lists, and so you can just scan that QR code if you want, and I'll just send you a very simple email with the map that I personally have for the transferable skills, and then also with all these questions that I've shared today. And what I invite you to do, and it's really straightforward, and it only takes 30 minutes, once you receive that, just sit down, have 30 minutes of quiet time, open a document, paste these questions, and then answer them in a few bullet points. And just that reflection in your next one-on-one with your boss or manager or whoever, like, bring that there and talk it through with them. And you'll be amazed, because for the first time, you're going to be talking about where you want to be 10 years from now. For the first time, you're going to relate your day-to-day to where you want to be. So that's a really cool exercise, and one that I recommend you do. And that's it for me. Thank you very much. And any questions are welcome.